everyone. My name is Paul Third. That man over there is Edward Thorne. And this week, I want to dive down the rabbit hole again and discuss a few things that I've learned over the past couple of weeks. I think, Ed, that the past couple of weeks have been pretty eye-opening for us. We've had a few touchy experiences, not literally, thankfully. I was in London, and thankfully, the touching did stay, very on board and stuff. It was all right. If I came back in one piece. My wife was glad to see I came back in one piece. But yes, however, I want to talk about the notion of a mixer in the modern era having a identity. Like when we think about a lot of mixers in the past, some mixers had like a sound, and I think obviously if we're going to speak about mixers that have a sound, it's got to be CLA. And I think that he has kind of popularized the notion of having an identity and a sound, and you go to that mixer because they have that specific sound. But what I've realized over the past probably 3-4 months, and especially going to MSM's studio last week, is that the modern day mixer, from what I can see, is almost more of a tradesman, an audio tradesman, rather than this creative sonic, master that just takes a song and crafts it into something special. I think, from what I could see, a mixer's job is to take the vision of the client and just make it 5 to 10% better. Listen for the issues and genuinely just give it a polish, refine it, and go, there you go. We're all amazing. What's your take, Ed? Because I think that, when we take the Can't Stop mix, I think that was probably the biggest realization that, it was like I enjoyed it and I got to be a bit spatial and a bit, creative. However, it was so vastly away from what Sam, the artist, wanted. And then Sam had messaged me and, we had a chat about the production and stuff like that. And I just sat back and thought, I need to start just mixing purely like less is more. When I mean less is more, like, just listen for certain problems, balance it well, bit of reverb, bit of delay, make it sound a little bit better, hand it back. Do you like it? Yeah, happy days. Get the payment done and off you pop. What's your opinion on all of that?
I think the reality is to survive in the music business on any level, and I speak from this working as a live musician and knowing many, many live musicians and sound engineers and studio folk in London. Most people need to have fingers in many pies. And now that's quite a macro view of it in terms of there are mix engineers who master. There are mix engineers who are also musicians and many combinations of other things. Focusing a bit more micro onto mixing, I would imagine it would be very hard until you're very successful and established being the key word more than successful. But I guess they kind of go hand in hand. Very well established in one niche or genre to make a permanent living out of that one genre. I think with budgets as low as they are and diminishing as quickly as they are doing, it would make sense to me to have as many different fingers in as many different stylistic pies as possible, which requires a very wide skill set, which is further compounding just how difficult this job is, I think. I also, as I've said many times before, I think we discussed it quite recently, the more skills you have to your bow, the better the mix engineer you're going to be, and you can pull from that toolbox of skills that you may have learned in different genres and apply them to the genre you're in. I'm always an advocate of the more you know, the better, with a caveat that some knowledge can be dangerous. I think you've got to master things, really, to get on top of that. So I agree. If in an ideal world, again, I come at this from a drummer's point of view, I was told at 16, be very, very good at one thing. Don't faff around with everything else. And then I ignored that and went off and studied all the different styles and developed my playing in ways that I wouldn't have done, I don't think, if I'd have just focused on the one thing. So I always go between the two arguments. And I'm still reading the book called The One Thing that M mentioned the other day when we saw him. And that very much says focus on the one thing that you want to succeed at. And that makes sense that you prioritize all your energy and goals into that. So if your one thing is to be known as an immersive, creative and ambient mix engineer, that's great. And I'm sure over time people will gravitate towards you as people get to know your body of work for that kind of style. Just as if you wanted to focus on just jazz music, you would eventually find the right musicians, find a niche. If you're good, you'll succeed. But I think that's almost I can't decide if it's almost a longer-winded route, however, with more chance of success, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like it's going to take you longer to get to your destination, as it were, success and popularity in that genre. I think it'll take you longer to get there, but there's more chance of becoming recognized and well-known in that one niche than there is if you study everything, going from whatever, this style to that style, whatever, all over the place without any consistency. Again, if we're applying the one thing, maybe it is better to just focus on the one style. But I think the way music is, being so multi-genre and, lines are blurring. I mean, I've had my face blown off this week by a band that our friend Andrish got me into. Shout out, Andrish. He got me into Falling in Reverse. And I was like, right, okay, whatever. I played this. He just said, check out the video, check out the song. The production of both is incredible. And the music is probably the best combination of kind of rap, rock, metal, punk, hardcore, all in one that I've heard. And I would say bands like Linkin Park have obviously did a great job for 20 years. Machine Gun Kelly does a great job, I think, of that, blurring those genres. But these guys take it to a new level. And the videos are like a Marvel production. They are unbelievable. And they've done a version of Papa Roach's, one of their songs. Can't remember what's called.
Is that the one?
And it's
Last Resort.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I nearly cried when I watched it.
Really?
Because I never fully understood the lyrics before until I heard their reimagining of it. It's absolutely incredible. But to bring this back to mixing, my point being that if you were mixing their music, you've got to have your rap hip hop vocal skills down. You've got to have your kind of drill beats mixing down. You've got to have your epic hardcore rock sounds down. You've got to have your classical orchestration for strings down. You've got to be a very versatile mix engineer to just do that one band because they are so multi-genre. So I'm going to say that I think maybe a bit of both. I think have an eye on your prize. For example, I love country music. I'd love to be Joe Carell in Nashville right now. He has some incredible music coming through his studios, and I'd love to do that. Just as I'd love to mix pop and rock stuff. But I'm also, as you know, happy to do whatever styles I can get my hands on, just to give things a try, to test myself and develop my ear somehow. So I think having a focus on the one thing, the one style, is a good idea, but picking up all the other tools along the way is also a good thing. As I mentioned, I think a couple of weeks ago, having your A, B, C, and D skill sets in mind and in order of what they are. So have your A game. Be aware of your B game that might be good, but you might not get hired for that style. But develop it until it becomes an A game. And then your C game might be genres that you don't like or you're not interested in. And your D game might be genres you've never even listened to. You can work on those until eventually they're all A games and you're the most diverse mixer possible. But I just think to be successful, CLA's nailed it. Jason Joshua's nailed it. M's nailed it. They've got their niche and they, I don't want to say they stick in their lane because I know M does a lot of different things, but they're probably very versatile mixers, but they are successful because they are the go-to guys. Spike Stent, obviously. Why am I not talking about him? In terms of, he's the pop mixer. Yeah. Does he do anything else? He'll dabble with pop rock, with Coldplay, and he's got his lane and his niche, and he's the fastest train in that lane. Yeah. Credit to him. But at some point, it's a shame he doesn't do more interviews. And I think a career goal of ours has to be the podcast to get him on. And we're annoyingly, for those listening, we are one step removed. Someone we know, and getting to know quite well, knows Spike as a good friend, and we would never use the contact to ask for the connection. That would be inappropriate. But yeah, it's frustrating how close we are potentially to him. So we'd love to get him on, and it would be interesting to pick his brains to see where he was studying and what genres he studied, because I also don't believe that you can be that good at something having not really studied and done all the work on all the other, maybe not all the other genres, but yeah, he's definitely spent some time amassing a lot of skills and a lot of tools. And when I mean talking about specializing in genres, I mean developing the techniques and the mixing tools and the philosophies and the concepts of mixing those styles to bring them into the style you're mixing. Because I think each genre has a slightly different approach. Like, you're not dealing with samples in jazz music. It's not a thing. You know, just as you're not dealing with the Glyn Johns technique on the drums in a metal situation, it's not the genre. So that's what I mean by having different mixing techniques down. What are your thoughts?
See, for me, something that kind of painted this kind of big picture to me on why it is, in my opinion, important to find a lane, find a vessel, which to me would probably be a genre. It was the recent video that Produce Like a Pro did, where Warren and Nolly Get Good went kind of side by side. And it was very interesting when I gave it to you and you were like, Nolly has just nailed that specific genre sound. And Warren went for Warren went for what he knows, which is a very open rock style kind of kit. But obviously I think it was like a metalish style track, and straight away it was like Nolly just nailed it, and he knows that genre inside and out. And I know, and I've heard of many bands that will go specifically to Nolly for the sound that he gets in that specific genre, because he understands that genre inside and out. Like, again, I know he's a versatile mixer as well, because I've heard a few mixes he's done in other genres, but what has made him successful is being that guy in that specific genre. And again, we think about MSM, he still is like the artist for grime. Like, if anybody's interested in the grime scene, they go to MSM. He's like the man for that. And obviously, if you think about the genres that grime transcends into, M's a very versatile mixer, but his vessel was grime. And, for many people, country's been their vessel. For CLA, it was rock. That was his vessel. He took the Green Days and the My Chemical Romances and, the Paramours kind of late on, and he just went with the sound. The same with TLA, Tom Lord-Alge, his brother, and they had a specific kind of New York heavy compression style, like let's push into the consoles, let's push into the compression, let's push into the EQ, let's make it sound, aggressive and lively. But then you've got, the pop mixers like your Serbans that you listen to a pop mix and you go, that there is a pop mix. You listen to Uptown Funk and you'll be, straight away, that there is a pop song. You'll listen to a Dua Lipa mix by Spike Stent and you go, yep, that's a pop sounding record. So what's hard for me is, I think I seen it the opposite way, where I was like, I'm an indie guy. That's what I am. I'm an indie guy. I love pop music. It's indie, pop, rock, blues, even dance to a certain extent, but, indie, pop, rock, that's kind of my thing. And that's what I would love to do. I'd love to do bands. I've always been a big band mixer. One of the biggest bands that I'd love to do for me would be something like Royal Blood. Imagine Dragons. Imagine doing Imagine Dragons record. That, me and my wife's been listening to them quite a lot. And see, especially in Atmos and stuff, the more I listen to Imagine Dragons, the more I just think the production is just unbelievable. Their production is amazing. Their vocals are amazing. Their beats are amazing. Man. Everything, man. And it's those are the things that I would love to work on. So you have to think, right, what would I be really passionate in? And what do I need to do to get, a chance of maybe working with artists that maybe sound a bit like them or are in that genre? You've got to mix it and you've got to do it in the way that I suppose people expect it. And I think what I've learned over the past couple of weeks is that my spatial sense of mixing in stereo isn't what is the norm and isn't what's going to get me a band, especially like Royal Blood. Again, you think about it, it's very, bass, distorted guitar, like banging drums. It's all about feel, and that's something that the PDP mix, the I Can't Stop mix, showed me was, yeah, it's like I need to get better at feel, and I realised just for the first time in my life that I don't listen to music. Me and Ed's been having a long conversation about this. I don't listen to music the way that other people listen to it. I don't feel music the way that other people feel music. I listen to lyrics and I listen to the story that the song tells, and I love to listen. And it's not feel, I listen. So when I listen to a song, I pick out all the elements. It's something I've always done, whether it be a Beatles track or it be like a modern pop song. I like to pick out, right, what's going on here? And I'd sit there and I critique and I go, right, that's there. Oh, I've got a wee synth part there. And I listen to melodies and I listen to all the music and all the stuff where, when you think about a music that's being played at a concert, my wife was trying to tell me her perspective. And she was like, Paul, when I went to a Red Hot Chili Peppers gig, nobody was listening to like, oh yeah, like the bass is playing that part. It was all a cohesive thing and everybody's at that gig because of it's just how the song makes you feel. And that's what Mark was talking about, was he's like, when I listen to Ed's mix, it makes me want to dance. Where in Paul's mix, it sounds very, analytical. He's given everything its space and he wants you to be able to pick out every instrument. And I've realised that actually that's not what mixers kind of do. I take a rough and I say, right, I see your rough and I'll raise you every single part that you gave me. I'm going to make it, give it a space, and you're going to be able to pick out every part. And they might turn around to me and say, yeah, Paul, I didn't really want you to be able to hear it. I wanted you to be able to feel it. It's actually just there to accompany that part. And some of these you're not even meant to really hear. And that is a big eye opener for me, that by speaking to Mark from Present Day Productions, he's opened my eyes to kind of show me that with Atmos now, that's where I'm more suited to. That whole spatial, having things in a space and, letting it kind of immerse you. That's for Atmos. So there's a place for my style of mixing, but if you're going to do stereo, then stick to what stereo is for most people, which is this stick on, back and black, and they're like rocking out in the car, that's their feel. Where for me, I'm listening to the guitar parts and I'm going like trying to critique the guitar solos and stuff and listen for squeaks. So I was speaking to, a few of my mentors, and everything kind of clicked for me, especially this week, where my good friend Emre Celik taught me early on. It's like, Paul, my advice for you is, and again, Emre always says, take it with a pinch of salt. It's just how I do it. But he told me, Paul, build a mix like a house. And you'll hear this so many times in so many mixing books. You'll hear it and read it in Mixing Engineer's Handbook. It's like kind of starts with that. And I now realise what he meant by that. Start with your drums, get your drums like rocking, get it exactly the way it should sound, then get your bass to fit in with that, and then get your vocals on top of that. So you've got drums, bass, and vocals, the main parts of what people are going to feel. The lyrics, the vocal, yes, that's identifiable. You've got the beat, which Ed's obviously amazing at being a drummer, and your low end, your groove, this thing that's keeping the song moving. And then your instruments, Paul, you just fit all your instruments in to that. And when I was doing the opposite, I was like kind of getting the drums in a way where I liked it, but I was like, oh no, the instruments are really important. And then I would almost kind of allow the instruments to have too much of a precedence. And I think what I've learned is that why many people will listen to older mixes of mine and Ed's and straight away they'll be like, I prefer Ed's, is because he's got the feel. He's prioritised the drums and he's got that priority to say, right, this instrument, as much as, I quite like it, it's getting in the way of a part of the beat. Could be, like a hi-hat or something like that, something that's really important to, the beat of the track. That's getting in the way. Sorry, that instrument can't take precedence over that. And it's those things that I'm thinking about. And, when I go back to mixing, now I've even thought about how I mix with the HE1000 SEs for the soundstage. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to mix with the Ananda Nanos because they've got the fast transient response. They've got the bass. They've got the slam. They've got everything that I'm going to be able to judge. If a vocal's like too smacky, or again, it's got transients or mouth clicks, or the low end's not right, or again, how hard is the drums hitting, compression, all these hyper details that help you get those elements correct. And then, when I'm ready for the instruments, then switch on the HEs and then place the instruments in the sound stage, but they've always got to accompany what you've got there. I think what Emra taught me is get the drums, bass, and vocals perfect, and then don't tweak them. Get the instruments to then sit around that. So I think that's hopefully going to be something, if I practice and practice that now, I'm going to be able to get better results where, you know, the feel of the track's going to be there. Is that something that kind of resonates with you a little bit, Ed? I imagine so, because I probably imagine that's what you do. Do you go drums, bass, vocals, and then you go to the instruments and just get everything to kind of sit around that?
Yeah, 100% resonates and is something I've been thinking about, and obviously you and I have been chatting extensively about. And I want to fill the listeners in on an interesting story that we had last week. But I would round off what you've said by saying that all of that, you learning your headphones, which ones, we'll talk about which ones, why you've moved from different ones to the others for different things. But the approach in terms of drums and bass and then vocals first, some people would argue vocals first, that's the most important thing, which in a pop spike stent setting, I would agree with maybe. You know, get those in the center, which you're very good at doing. Your vocal sound is always one of the best that I hear out of anyone's mixes. And for a pop thing, that's great. And then you might want to shape everything else around that. Some genres, it's all about the kick and the 808. Put everything else around that. That's the focal point for the energy to create the emotion. So I guess it's identifying, not just in the mix, but in the genre and the production, what the energy focus is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think that is something that people is starting to emerge, just how important that is for me. I think I've naturally, because I've always performed and I've been very drum centric in terms of, you know, how can I play live to create energy for the band and the audience? That's always been at the back of my mind. I think I naturally lean towards that with drums in mixing, but I don't necessarily get it right. Case in point being the present day production guys loved what I did. I sent the track to M today and he was like, yeah, not really any depth, and you know, your low end's not really energetic enough. And I was like, right, but I've put in more low end since I've submitted the present day production mix, because I'm still tweaking that mix, determined to get it right. So we've gone down another rabbit hole today of things I need to consider that I think we should maybe chat about in another episode once I have explored it more with him. And then again, it's all subjective, you know.
Yeah,
like those are two fantastic opinions, and yours as well. I trust very much, and they're all different. So, you know, for me, it's a bit of a confusing time, especially as I'm having low end translation issues in the studio with the subwoofers, and this is a whole other story that we may document on another episode when I've resolved what I'm doing. But it's genre dependent, it's subjective, it's production dependent, and again, it's all about skills. You know, the good thing about that present day production mix was it was a challenge on many different levels that has sparked these conversations so that you and I are thinking very differently. You know, and I know my chats with Em will lead to thinking about, you know, depth and, you know, how heavy. He's literally just said one sentence to me earlier, which has got me thinking already, which is some things need to be big, something needs to be small to create the depth in the mix. And I was like, I'd never thought of it that way. I was thinking of forward and back, which I think I have in the present day production mix, because I've purposefully got the strings a bit back and the synths in places, and you know, there's layers to things, and I'm implementing that with clients and things. But in terms of making things, something big, something small, that's something I've not necessarily thought about, because in my mind, I naturally gravitate towards everything being big and forward, which has obviously led us down the limiting and bus compression and volume issues that we've discussed and explored. So the beauty of it is, we are exploring all these concepts. So again, going back to, is it the case of doing the one thing and pushing on with that, Probably not, because I think I'd be mixing the same as I was 2 years ago if I did that. But trying different styles out, speaking to different people, getting different opinions is helping hone, I think, the skills. So we had an interesting experience this week, which was that Paul came down to London and we went and hung out with MSM at his studio and had the absolute privilege of watching him mix a couple of songs, which is utterly mind-blowing. He is worth every penny he charges. He's very good and very quick, but good and quick because of the amount of experience that he just personifies. Just talking to him he's very smart, and his philosophy comes out in abundance when you get chatting about crazy little details. But with that, Paul brought down his Ananda
Nanos, and you keep on saying Hernanda Nanos. Tequila, Ananda Nanos.
So the Hyphaman HE1000s, which are your spatial headphones, aren't they?
Yeah.
The stereo imaging on those and the width is like no other headphone I've heard. It's absolutely incredible. But at the expense of the center, compared to the Nanos that are very center-based, and the power and the girth in the low end and the sub-content is like nothing else I've heard on any other headphones. It was remarkable hearing those. So is it my understanding that you were mixing on the HE1000s first?
Yeah.
And
so
then going into the Nanos for the aggression?
The way that I do it for a long time was get the sound stage right first and get the whole mix simmed in the way I like it, because I'm obviously a special mixer. And then I'd go to the Ananda Nanos. Then I'd go, is the track feeling right? And then I'd kind of really listen to the drums in the low end. And I was doing it arse from elbow, and I realised that now. So, yeah, I think...
So you're now thinking that was the wrong way around, because
absolutely.
Actually maybe the focus is on the foundation and the energy,
which
is largely drum and bass centered in the middle. And then the spatial stuff can kind of fit around that. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you realising that, I think your mixes are going to translate to speakers better immediately.
Yeah, hopefully.
If you don't have an in-house mastering engineer like we're fortunate enough to have with Marcel at Actu Make with the working audio tools, DistroKid have you covered. For just $99 a year, you can buy unlimited mastering for all of your tracks in tandem with unlimited releases via DistroKid. Mixair from DistroKid uses AI technology to measure the EQ and the dynamics of your track and then present you with numerous options to tweak and customize your master. You can flip between the original and the generic mastered option.
Blame it on the whiskey. Blame it on the bad weed.
So instantly we can hear that's making the track louder, and it's also slightly flattening the EQ, bringing in a little bit more of the mid-range and of course the top end. We can adjust the intensity, which is how much compression and limiting is being applied to the track.
Blame it on the only thing you've ever seen. Run and tell your mother. Blame it on your brother.
I think somewhere in the middle works for this track. And the EQ options are self-explanatory. We can make the track effectively duller or brighter.
Just ain't right. All you do is lie. All you do is try to deny. All you do is lie. Even when you know it just ain't right. All you do is lie.
Download your mastered track and release it as easily as you do all of your other unlimited uploads. Get 30% off your DistroKid subscription using the Working Audio Tools VIP link below. So the other thing Paul and I did was we had a session in my studio and we played both of our present day production mixes through the speakers, and I think you heard my concerns about your mix, and then you also had your concerns about mine, and then we tried the headphones that I've got, and you said, yeah, your mix works really well in your headphones. I was like, I know. This is why I was confused why it doesn't work in your headphones. And then I tried my mix in your headphones. And I was like, right, I get what Paul's talking about. So we basically did a big experiment to get on the same page of referencing and translation and where each other's coming from. And we basically deduced that we hear low end very differently, didn't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if the Harman curve has a deviation, is it 9 decibels or even, I think it's 12 decibels, isn't it, in the low end? I think they
you're
settled on
normally
9.
boosting at least, you're normally boosting between 9 and 12. Normally for most stock hi-fi curves and headphones, you're boosting like 9, 12 dB in the low end.
Which for speakers would blow my mind. 9 dBs on my subs in this room would just fucking start crumbling.
But
the
that's
walls
because
away.
they're already at that level. That's what people forget, is that Harman's based on treated speakers in a room. So that's trying to emulate in headphones the low end that's already in, a treated room. Like if you're in MSM's room, if you're listening to his Amphions and you're in that room, the low end is like big and massive, and like you don't get that in stock headphones, like the stock hi-fi curve. Because the thing about the headphone hi-fi curves is that they're all made for the average consumer, and what they try and do is they try to mitigate certain issues that can happen in mixes. So they try and find an average of, right, there might be some mixes that aren't mixed that great and the low end is like too big. For example, so maybe some NS10 mixers that don't mix with a sub and the low end's all over the shop. Or again, you might get an amateur mix that's really harsh in the high end. They kind of, well, actually, no, it's the opposite. I think maybe because they know that some mixes are kind of dulled in modern day times, so they kind of give presence peaks, so things sound a bit more brilliant and have a bit more clarity. But they're normally just hyped and in the highs and taken out in the lows, so you don't really have any worries about like if there's any low end where people go, oh, that's a bit boomy and that sounds a bit shit. Where what Harman does is Harman gives you how the records actually should sound, and it's showing you all the problems. And if you're listening to low end and Harman, you're going to hear low end. And I think that's what me and you realised was when we had your subs and then we listened to the Nanda Nanos, we listened to my mix, you were like, oh, I could see why your mix passed your van test, but mine's didn't.
Yeah.
And that's why you experiment. And I think that's why I get frustrated when people say, oh, yeah, speakers only. What we are realising is, and again, about the same with speakers, I've got the speakers in my room now, and it is handy, and I do go to them. I could just try and mix on the headphones, but having them gives me that extra bit of reference point to the fact I've got fucking 3 sets of speakers, and I've got another set of speakers coming like next week from another company.
But the biggest speakers are the ones behind you right now, aren't they? They're the.
Oh yeah. I forget, but they're just for the piano. They're my LA speakers.
For anyone new to the podcast and watching, that is Paul's live room, I think.
Yeah, it's my live room.
Right, that's your live room. So his control room has 2 or 3 different sets of speakers in that can be viewed in other episodes.
For anybody that doesn't know, and we've mentioned it before sometimes, but when we were in LA, DJ Nelson, because I went and met Tura Medina for the first time, who we've had on the podcast, and he introduced me to DJ Nelson, and he was like, get Paul some speakers. So like DJ Nelson got them, and he was like, oh, Paul, do you want them hydro dipped? Like, I'm into hydro dipping and stuff. It's like, yeah, cool, do that. So that's why they're like this, kind of spacey kind of thing. So
we definitely can't see it with the resolution of the video, but I have seen them because I ended up looking after them for you in LA on which was that the Audient night out?
Yeah, I got way too drunk. It was a free bar.
Understatement.
Understatement, yeah. And and went over my ankle because Ed thought it'd be a good idea to go, Paul, this is a posh fucking, they like Audient treated us and they produced like a bro team. And Ed was like, yeah, go across those plants. Bet you won't do it. Me fucking bollocked. I was like, and went right over my ankle. But what Ed didn't realise, that me being me, I was like, Ed, these speakers are staying with me. And everybody had to take a turn with these speakers. We were in some dive bar in LA. And, I was just like, oh man, I think I've broken my ankle. I was like, no, you need to take these speakers, bro. Like, even randoms had a chance.
We had Andy, the head of Audient, of all his jobs in LA, carrying Paul's fucking speakers around.
And look at them, they survived, and they're now for my piano. All of that torture just for a fucking piano. Because I've got so many speakers now. No, what? I actually quite like them. It sounds better than the fucking shitty stock speaker that's underneath it. It sounds good, but obviously, like, as soon as you get that, like, the Kali IN5s, like, they are the reason why I'm like, I couldn't mix on a pair of two-ways. Like, I could teach myself how to mix on two ways, but Jesus Christ, when you've got three ways, it's like, why would I mix on two ways? Three ways just make your life so much easier. I could hear everything more in a mix. Where like the PreSonus and the Kali LP8s, I would struggle. I feel like I'd have to work at those to make them really work in a mix. Where with the Kali IN5s, super easy. It reminds me of the depth I get on headphones. You know what I mean? But
yeah, the difference is remarkable between a two-way and a three-way. And for those people who maybe haven't heard of three-way, the main differences for me are obviously width of the frequency spectrum. In other words, three-ways can go lower and higher because they've got more drivers to do the same, cover the same amount of frequencies. They do a better job of it because each driver can focus on a smaller part of the frequency range, so you get more fidelity and detail in that. Vastly improved stereo imaging, phantom center,
mid-range as well. God, fucking the mid-range difference is
depth,
massive.
Yeah, front to back sound, and it's one of those things. In audio, people will be like, yeah, what's so important about that? Just if you have a chance, go to a music shop and compare your two ways, if you've got two ways, to any three-way, and you'll know what I mean. Now, unfortunately, three-ways usually come with a price tag that starts, I'd say, at about £2,000 a pair. Maybe even more than that. But it's worth paying for, I think. It's not for everyone, but yeah, for those of you who haven't come across the difference, those are the main differences. It's one of those things, it's like Trinnov. You got to hear it to believe it. You'll think, nah, whatever, it's expensive. Hear it and you'll be like, okay.
But even when you think about the Kali IN5s, I think the Kali IN5s are about, I don't know, 600 for a pair. And the difference between...
okay. I stand corrected then. Right.
They've got... it's a coaxial design they've got.
Right. I'm thinking of traditional
the tweeter sits there,
driver.
Yeah, and the mid-range driver sits here. So the tweeter sits in the mid-range driver. But the difference between the PreSonus RS Studio 8s and the Kali LP8s, fucking, it's night and day. Like, it's absolutely night and day. Where, like, with those, I was like, I could mix on them, but I would much rather use my headphone setup. But when I listen to the Kali IN5s, I'm like, yes, that is, I could see what all the fuss is about. And then obviously, like what Ed said, when you go up to your PMCs and your ATCs and stuff, you're going to get blown away. And you're going to realise why people spend so much money on, their monitoring. But us being us, we've got distracted. But the main point of what me and Ed were kind of discussing there is that what we are trying to essentially do is trying to compete. When we were thinking about the low end, we were listening a lot to Spike Stent with Dua Lipa, because that was like a very pop thing that I thought kind of was similar-ish to where I wanted it. The I Can't Stop mix to sound. And when you listen to these songs, you do realise that, and when you listen to these songs, it's very easy to sit there and go, my God, Spike Stent, oh God, he just transformed it. You don't know what the production sounded like. And when we were with M, he pulled up a rough and it was like, shit, this is like practically
that's
mixed.
Better than most things I've mixed.
Yes. And I think that's why... And that's why it's important that, you have these experimentations and you do and invest to hear, the things that you're not hearing. But it's very important when you do hear them to try and get yourself in a studio with a mixer who can show you, a modern day production that they work on. Because Jason, when we did it at Abbey Road, me and Ed just looked at each other and we were like, oh my God, this sounds fucking mixed already. Remember, we were like, this sounds better than this is a rough.
They're rough. Jesus. They're rough mixers. I mean, we have to take into account that their rough mixers have been prepped by their very skilled and highly talented assistant engineers, and stuff's been run through the analog chain. When everyone says Jason's fully in the box, he is for the last 3 hours of the project. But all the other stuff, as Em showed us last week, he's mostly in the box, but he ran some stuff through analog gear. Yeah. That was working magic that he can't even describe. Very subtle little things, but it elevated something so that he could do the rest of it successfully in the box.
And I think that's what I learned from the experience with them and Jason, is that when you look at their sessions and you do see, just like even Joe Carroll, it'll be like a Pro Q3 and a compressor. It's very like, you're lucky there's like more than 3 plugins on a track. But it's because the productions are so good. And, for me, what I've learned is that they do have a sound, but their sound is taste, but not in the way that I saw taste. I saw taste like, as Ed likes to say all the time, I like credit for my work. It's like, yeah, see that tremolo effect that I put in there? What about that? You know, what about that I pinged over there? What about that special reverb I put in? Oh yeah, I totally swapped out the snare, by the way. Did you notice that? Artist is like, yeah, I know. I gave you the drums.
And I gated all the
wanted you
ghost
to
notes.
mix them. I know, yeah. But it's all, it's all learning experiences, and especially with the ghost notes. Like, if I was to, just purely focused on the drums and went, right, just mix them as they are and just allow the artist to make that decision. Because at the end of the day, what Sam had made a very good point to me was, he said, Paul, we specifically chose that snare. So but it's because I didn't see it as a client mix. I seen it as an experimentation, but I should have treated it like a client mix, because that's where my experience should be going. Every mix should be essentially like a client mix if I could make it a client mix. And, I should have done what you did and worked with the snare. I should have just taken the drums and all the elements and just got the balance up, got all the faders up without doing anything, which is what I've said in previous videos, and I kind of swayed away from it. But I need to go back to it. It's just work on the drums, bass, like vocals. You don't need to do much. Just try and, listen. Are there any issues, right? Do I need to do anything? Do I need to time align them? Are there phase issues? It's like, does something need compressed? And then bring each element in and work at it and learn that your sound is the artist's sound. And I think, is it possible that, the days of the CLAs and stuff are over, and this is probably the reason why you don't hear of them, as much, mix. I mean, I can't think of like a massive, like song, but like Bard, when he does Green Day stuff, and when they come back, back from the dead. But, I kind of, from what I hear, the mixer's job is to see it more like, you're an extension of the artist's vision, and your job is just to use your taste. Like what you said M was doing was, can you hear that? Yeah, I can hear it, but I was still subtle enough. So he's like, I've made a change that I know has like enhanced what they've given me, but it's not enough of a drastic change where he's going to think, what has he done? You've changed that. He's not going to notice it. He's just going to listen to it as a cohesive piece and say, yeah, I see what you've done. This sounds polished. This is why I go to you. You've taken what I've given you and made it better. And that's actually all artists see mixing engineers for, is it? Really? Like, I'm so close to the song, just make it better.
I mean, listening to him last week, what he was doing to the mixes, I mean, these couple of tracks that we heard were very low channel count. But it was almost like what he was doing was what I seem to be doing with mastering at the moment, in that you're taking a track and making it maybe 5% better if you're lucky.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's what he was doing with the mixing, because the production was so good already. Whereas though, as we know, what we've done, we've had to cut our teeth fixing some stuff, and some stuff's just been a complete clusterfuck beyond repair. And that's very disheartening. But those are the areas where we really have to challenge ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And every now and then you can get a good set of multi-tracks, like the Another Love Song ones, and what was the other one with the HLC multi-tracks, and every now and then all your skills can come together.
Oh, the Mark Daniel Nelson ones, God, I done
two.
On reflection, I just should have pulled up the faders and just tweaked them like minimal, because I know that's what Mark would have done.
Yeah, but all this is good training. These
Definitely.
philosophies are good for us to evolve. So, I mean, we could both go back to HLC now, and we'd probably both do it very differently again.
Yeah.
Not that we'll do that, but...
I think, you know what, I want to say this to Ed now, because somebody said it to me today, and I was like, oh, I need to tell Ed that, and I'm glad I just remembered.
Your snare sound sucks.
I was speaking... I was speaking to a engineer, and they were like, oh, I love the podcast, blah, 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 and he's like...
cool.
He was like, oh, I've worked with such and such. I was like, okay, cool. And then he was saying, I love the podcast, and we got onto the topic we're on now, and he said, well, want me to tell you how I see like my job, Paul? And he's like, I do kind of minimal approach. I am one of these proper less is more, mixers, that I just take what the artist gives me and I listen for any problems. And like kind of what Mark thinks about when Mark from Present Day Productions about mastering, your job is just to basically like, does anything need touched? If it doesn't, hand it back. And he went very, very minimal. And he goes, what I do is I send it back to the artist because they're paying the bills. And, even if I'm like, I could have done X, Y, and Z to make this better in my view and my taste. At the end of the day, I've got 3 mixes on that day. If I can just make it 5% better and the client goes, you know what? That's exactly what I had in my head. You've taken my vision and you've done exactly what I wanted you to do for it. Then happy days. And he said, and this was the quote, he said, I see a mix as almost holding a mirror back up to the artist in their production. So if they come back to me and they say, I'm unhappy with this or that in the mix, I can say, well, that's your snare sound, that's your kick sound, that's your like synth. You chose a synth that was purely chosen, or again, it was like you poorly recorded that acoustic guitar, and that sound that you've got in there is due to the recording, is because it's got too much reverb in it because you recorded in a shitty room, or your mic technique wasn't right. That probably needs re-recorded. Now, many people, Paul, would try and work at it and craft it into something else. But he's like, is that really my job? You give me what you give me, and what I do is I go, right, there it is back, and as good a piece as I can give it that's as close to what your original vision was. And that kind of got me when he said his view of mixing is putting a mirror back up to the client of what their song and their production is. When all I do is I just go, I take that, there it is back to you. Here's what I've done. I heard the issues in it. I fixed the timing little bits. I've made little tweaks here. There's a little bit of harshness there. Added a little bit of verb for a little bit of depth and stuff like that. And it's minimal stuff. And if they've got an issue, then it's not me that's the problem. It's their production. And, when I started then speaking to a few other people, I noticed that that's what they're like. How they're very quick to say, this isn't right. This is really poorly recorded. I could try and make it work. I can try and fix it. Or what you could do is you can try and give me another vocal take. Do you want me to work with that? If you want me to work with it, this is how it's going to sound. I'm not a miracle worker.
I mean,
you know what I mean?
I think you're in very risky territory there. I totally understand why Mark, for example, approaches things like that, because he's very confident in what he does and his ears are good, and he ultimately, it's obvious that he wants the best result.
Yeah.
Now, I know from being mentored by other musicians and, seeing them try and coach other musicians who aren't as open-minded, they are often met with resistance and resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's your first mix with a client and you don't know them, you've got to get to know where their boundaries are, how personal they are. I think you can tell straight away whether someone's going to be resistive to criticism or not.
Yeah.
If they're open to it, great, and you can engage in a communicative relationship where you can say, actually, this isn't right, maybe we can redo that. Cool. But some people won't be receptive to that, and that's a very hard kind of course to navigate, I think, because if you do go down that route and say, do you know what, actually, everything's great, but the acoustic guitar sounds like your cat recorded it in a bathroom on an iPhone. But that's the main focal point. Some clients would be like, no, fuck you, and they'll walk away and you'll lose the album. Others would be like, oh yeah, do you know what? Look, I don't have a studio. Cool, come down mine. We'll redo it. Boom, double the business opportunity there. So I think you could lose a lot, but gain a lot.
I've not explained it right. So like what he was kind of meaning to me was like, I get what you're meaning. You wouldn't sit there and go, yeah, fucking redo this. You know what I mean? I'm not mixing it unless you redo it. What he would do is he would just mix it. So again, if the acoustic guitar did sound like it was recorded in somebody's fucking kitchen, you know what I mean? And it's like you've got pots and fucking whatever like clattering about, and your auntie's at the back, hooking on the phone to Auntie Jean. He's like, I would just mix it that way. It's like, and again, like drum samples, Polly went, I just work with the drums and I give them it back. And if they say, I don't like the sound of the drums, then I go back to them and I say, right, okay, cool. What would you like to do? Would you like me to add samples to it? Yeah, what kind of sound would you be after? He went, that's the process I take. He went, I let the artist guide me instead of me making these decisions. You know what I mean?
I literally lost the mix because I made that decision. If you remember,
really?
There was a friend of mine who I was assuming he would come back to me and say, hey man, look, I kind of want a more triggered drum sound. He didn't. He just went and hired the other guy and then said, oh yeah, this is his mix. And instantly the main difference was the drum sampling. And I was like, well, you could have just told me that and I'd have done it. But he didn't. He just went elsewhere. So I've lost a mix doing that.
But
So
let's
again,
flip it. Let's flip it though. Let's flip it, right? Should you probably, before you thought about doing the mix, had the conversation to say, due to it being genre specific, are there any like things that need to be in this mix? Like, do you want the drums triggered? How do you want the drums to sound? Do you want me to just work flat out from the drums? You know what I mean? Maybe that was a conversation.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. The conversation should have been had up front, not after the audition was done and failed. Yeah.
But a good learning experience again. You know what I mean? An experience that you wouldn't have learned of. You know, I know it stung. Like a lot of the things have stung like a bitch for me and you. But when we speak to other mixers, they're like, Paul, we've had these experiences way more than yous. And, you know, I think that many mixers probably do go out trying to have a sound and be unique. And I think probably the way I'd end the podcast is, if you're watching this and you're kind of along the lines of a Paul Third and you're like, yeah, but I want to stand out from other people and I want to have a sound, your sound is most likely not going to be the artist's sound. And I don't know many times that, you know, an artist these days will align with the sound that you have. And, you know, it's a risky thing to have because you're going to get more work if your style is the artist's style and you're able to adapt to the artist style. And I think that's something that I've applauded Ed for over, you know, especially over the years now. I can't believe it's years. We're talking years now. That's how long we've been doing this now. But, you know, what Ed's great at is listening to the genre and listening and going, right, what are the key things that you normally are in these genres? And a good thing Ed does a lot is, I remember in the Mark Daniel Nelson mix, you listen to other mixes and other releases that the client had.
I went to listen to his back catalogue in the gym, and identified what was clearly important to him in the mixes.
So what you did was your sound of that mix was your interpretation of his sound, and you tried to get his sound. And I think, you know, that's what I've learned is that, you know,
again, though, could have been a bad thing. He might have come to a new mix engineer, maybe. And Joe Carroll talked about that in his episode. He had a very successful relationship with a client for 2 albums, I think, got #1 songs and albums, and they moved on and they didn't use him for the 3rd album, and he was really confused why this formula's working. They wanted a different sound, clearly, so it might be that someone's come to you to not get the, you know, someone goes to Paul Third for the Paul Third sound. You know, right, we've had the Ed Thornton sound, it's boring, we don't like it. You know, we want the Atmos sound now, so we're going to go to Paul. Assuming maybe that I can't do that, and I'd say, yes, okay, I'm not the guy for that. Go up to Scotland, speak to that wearing guy.
But I do think what we both know is that in a world that, okay, it was interesting when we learned a few things where we thought, you know, A&Rs had way more control now than they did maybe 5-10 years ago. A&Rs still have control, but not as much musical control as, you know, many would think these days. Again, it depends on the label, depends in which country you're in. But, you know, as almost like a trade, you know what I mean? Our job is to satisfy the client, you know, and there are kind of, you know, specific kind of standards that, you know, A&Rs expect and record labels expect, which are the reasons why your Spikes and your Serbins, you know, have been the singles mixers, because they can, you know, identify what's trending and what's hip. You know, that's fucking, I can't believe I just said hip. God, I'm not even 35 yet and I'm saying hip. Jesus
That's
Christ.
Hip with an I, for those who can't translate Scottish from hip. It's like you turned Kiwi for a minute there.
Yeah, but what? Come on, get it up, yours, right? Know what? I'm done, right? That's it. No, we're ending it, right? You know what I'm trying to say, because I'll waffle, but yeah, no, we'll finish it at that, right? Just let your sound, if you're starting out, my advice that I've learned, don't take it with a pinch of salt, is, you know, try and just make your artist happy. It's great to have your own sound, but, you know, establish a working relationship with these people, figure out what they want, and if they allow you to experiment, and they would allow you to experiment, then allow the artist to tell you, right, go and try something different on this mix, and then you could maybe do a kind of Paul Third. But I think, you know, what I've learned is that, you know, the artist's vision is very important to them, and they're coming to you as, you know, a professional. And normally what they see as a professional is, just take my mix, don't ruin it, tidy it up, and make it, you get that 5-10% better. So that's what I'd have to say.
I think ultimately what I've got out of this chat is that it all comes down to communication again, and
Absolutely,
communication on many
100%.
levels. communication with the client before the mix. You know, do you want sampling? Do you want vocal tuning? Fuck me,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
a sensitive subject.
Yeah.
Communication with mentors, with fellow engineers, other people in the industry. You know, just communication. Ask questions. The most valuable thing I learned at university was from Dave Weckl, who said, ask questions. I won't go into the story, but it's a good one. But a very good story of just exactly why you should ask questions all the time. So I think that's my takeaway from this episode. But if in doubt, plow on and keep going and be patient and try and get better, because fuck me, it's hard to get good at this.
It is. And just remember, right, if there's one thing we're going to leave you with, just remember, it's absolutely true. Never assume. Because if you assume, you'll just make an ass out of you and me. And me and Ed have been asses, and definitely in the past. And yeah, it's been emotional. There you go.
Make
I'm
an
Paul Third.
ass out of you and me. What does... okay, I'm thinking of assumed with a D on the end.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
On
That's
that
your
bombshell. It's been emotional.
Let's move on.